I'm joined today by Christopher Goes. He's co-founder of Heliax, Anoma, and Namada. And basically, Heliax is kind of an incubator and breeding ground for kind of disruptive projects like Anoma or Namada. A quick teaser here. We will today exclusively focus on Namada and cover Anoma in a follow-up session. So if you're not familiar yet with Namada, it is an upcoming project for asset-agnostic and multi-chain privacy. And why is that important? Forensic tooling on blockchains get more powerful as I speak, and users of these blockchains feel like more exposed with this powerful tooling coming up, because the nature of blockchain is that it's transparent, and therefore like on-chain privacy is becoming one of the focal points within our industry again. And Namada, in my opinion, is at the very heart of this expedition. So therefore, I'm very excited today that Christopher joins me as a sparring partner in order to like explore Namada, especially since my gut feeling is kind of telling me that Namada will have a substantial impact on our industry. And hence, welcome, Christopher, to today's conversation around Namada, and thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's dive into the subject. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Let's start very, very conventionally with a brief introduction of yourself, your background, and also what I'm keen to know, why crypto?
Fair. Right. So I'm Christopher. I think I first learned about crypto from a Slashdot post about Bitcoin in 2011 or something like this. When I was living in Oregon, I was in high school, and I was really bored. The countryside, there's not that much to do. But it does have, the Oregon countryside has cheap electricity, cheap, sustainable electricity, even thanks to all the hydro. And at that point in time, it was still possible to mine Bitcoin using GPUs. So I was just like a bored nerdy, call it a high school student. But I did manage to put together a GPU Bitcoin miner and ran that for a while. Unfortunately, I didn't really keep the Bitcoins, fortunately or unfortunately, that's how you look at things. But I learned about things then. And then I didn't really pay, I was not so deep into the philosophy of it at the time. I was just more of an experimentalist. But it was, it was cool. Like I couldn't get a bank account. I think I tried to, but I could get a Bitcoin address or whatever. So I tried to rent a virtual server or something. I was into playing games using Bitcoin that I didn't do so much, and then sort of re-entered after college, examining Ethereum. I worked on a project called Wyvern, which was a sort of Ethereum generalized decentralized exchange protocol. It was used by OpenSea for a while. But I was really interested in kind of the idea of political polycentrism, because to me that was maybe the appeal of this kind of technology, was that it might offer a substrate for maybe more, allowing communities to preserve both some degree of autonomy and interoperability to kind of run their own infrastructure and settle a lot of their interactions within infrastructure controlled by the community, not dependent on some like gargantuan state or some like bunch of tech bros in San Francisco or whatever, while still retaining the ability to interoperate, right? Because if you have to build your commune and you can't do any economic exchange with the outside world, then it's like pretty costly, because you give up all of these nice things that we get because we live in this very interconnected society where people specialize and produce things that other people can experience. So to me, the promise, not really yet realized, but like the promise of all this protocol nonsense is to try and balance this scale and give this sort of midpoint between autonomy and interoperability that it seems to me like might be very appealing. So anyway, I worked on the IBC protocol for Cosmos, which I thought was maybe like a part of the interoperability puzzle. That's kind of the first, more serious engagement I had in space. I worked on that for about 2 years till the launch of IBC, and then just after that started Namada with Awe Adrian.
Okay, cool. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, with Cosmos, we will dive into that later, because as I understood, it will Namada will be joining the interchain ecosystem kind of. But maybe to get our audience on track first, let's begin with a very high level overview of Namada and maybe increase complexity as we go. So with the concept of asset-agnostic privacy, which is the main pillar of Namada, What are some of the problems Namada is trying to solve in the current landscape?
Right. So I think first, maybe just I want to define Namada. So Namada is kind of three things which are related to each other. First and foremost, it's a network of people and communities who are interested in the shared value of privacy, and in particular, who are interested in creating a kind of portal between the public world that we live in today, at least on the blockchains, and the kind of private world of the future. And there's, you can hypothesize about the private world of the future, but it doesn't exist yet. We live in this world today of a bunch of public assets on public blockchains and kind of a public in the sort of people sense that does not necessarily where privacy is this maybe like confusing concept that hasn't been integrated into daily practice in a kind of culturally consistent way, right? So in our view, we need a lot of kind of infrastructure to ease this transition between the public and private worlds. And some of that infrastructure is technical, some of it is cultural, some of it is maybe socioeconomic. So to that end, Namada kind of, first and foremost is network, right? Then there's the Namada protocol, which is what is instantiated by the chain that will hopefully be launched later this year. And the Namada protocol is what provides this kind of asset-agnostic privacy. So part of our thesis is that in order to help bridge these worlds, Namada needs to give people the ability to use their existing assets and kind of move into this private zone with the ability still to move those assets back out of the private zone when they need to use the applications that they're currently using, right?
Yeah.
So this is why we do this kind of asset-agnostic privacy. Yeah. The third thing, Namada is also a token, which will be the proof of stake token for this protocol that we launched later this year. And that token, we've designed around kind of aligning incentives around the shared value of kind of privacy, especially sort of privacy for the public or chain-agnostic privacy, treating privacy as a public good. There's a lot of stuff that has to be produced, like both sort of technical and cultural infrastructure in order to aid in this transition between worlds. And the Namada token is at least our attempt to kind of help coordinate incentives around the protection of that infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, very cool. But I mean, now we only scratch the surface. Let's dive into what it really offers, Namada, because currently, talking about the unified privacy set, currently there are already various and plenty privacy solutions or different approaches. But what the current solutions do, or it's like a fragmented and never privacy functionalities emerged alongside. So, and this is kind of nowadays, it's kind of an isolated privacy subset of the crypto ecosystem, right? But I mean, it's pretty obvious that at least to some degree, privacy should be omnipresent by default. And I wonder, does Namada solve this with the unified privacy set? What is a unified privacy set? And also, how does it compare to the current solutions? If we look at Aztec, for example, or Tornado Cash Nova, or also, I mean, there's also a lot of development going on since CK Major currently, and for example, Penumbra. How does it compare to the current competitive landscape?
Right. So Namada is designed around, the Namada protocol specifically is designed around really just one product goal, which is to provide as much privacy as possible for the assets that people want to use in holding those assets privately and sending them. So we're not, there are other people who are trying to do other things, like Penumbra is trying to build a private decentralized exchange. I think Aztec now is trying to build some kind of private smart contracts. Those things are great, and Namada is not trying to do them. Namada is only trying to bring privacy to existing assets in Rust and kind of in transfers. Because we think, in some sense, that's like the simplest, dumbest thing. And at the same time, it doesn't exist in the world. So we're kind of very laser focused on that specific problem. And we think that it requires, it's not just a matter of, so Namada has what we call the multi-asset shielded pool, which is the cryptographic part of the protocol that allows you to send all of these different assets from different places. You could send assets from the Cosmos ecosystem over IBC. You could send assets from the Ethereum ecosystem over Namada's Ethereum bridge. And all of those assets can go into this unified shielded with ASP. And when those assets are in that shielded pool, everyone gets more privacy because an observer of a transaction on the chain cannot determine anything about the transaction, including which asset was sent, right? So if we think about like, Zcash or Monero, some of these different isolated privacy chains, when an observer looks at one of those chains, they don't know maybe how much the asset was of the asset was sent or who it was sent to, but they know which asset was sent just by looking at the chain, right? Whereas if you send all of your assets to one place, now the observer doesn't even know that. And because of the way the kind of statistical privacy guarantees work, the more assets you have and the more transactions you have in one shielded set, the more privacy all users of that shielded set get. So it has this kind of like agglomerative network effect. And Namada specifically includes a incentive mechanism designed to compensate users for holding their assets privately, because by holding their assets privacy, they're providing more privacy to other users, even when they're not doing anything, right? Even if they're just holding their assets there in the shielded set. So we designed this this reward mechanism to recirculate some of that privacy value, which is provided by those users holding their assets back to those users, also in the hopes that people will, see this opportunity to kind of hold their assets privacy and benefit from that. So this, relates to the question of incentive alignment. As for how does Namada compare to previous, like Trinado Cash Nova or something like that? So Trinado Cash is at least self-styles itself as a mixer. And the way that it works on Ethereum is basically like you can deposit and you can withdraw. And when you withdraw, there's some, I think this term mixer is kind of technically inaccurate, but they do use it. When you withdraw, certainly you are doing so using a zero-knowledge proof, and an observer doesn't necessarily know which deposit your withdrawal came. So Namada is not doing that. Namada is a full multi-asset shielded pool. So the idea with Namada is that you could send your assets to Namada, and then you can keep them in the shielded pool and keep selling them around in the shielded pool. And when you need to do something on with those assets, other than most people, most of the time, are just sending their assets around. Like the thing that most happens with assets is payments. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's very simple and it's straightforward to make private. And when you want to do something else with your assets, we propose that instead of kind of needing to keep your assets on Ethereum, you can keep your assets, say, on Namada, or at least some of them, and keep them shielded. And when you need to do some transparent thing, you just withdraw the assets that you specifically need to use to do that transparent thing. Like you need to do a swap, let's say. You withdraw the assets that you want to swap, you swap them, then you send, either you send the results of the swap like directly on to whoever it is that you're paying, or you send them back to Namada and shield them again. So in some sense, we're proposing this kind of like change in usage that's designed to create a much higher degree of practical privacy. Because if you hold your assets privately most of the time, but just like unshield some of them sometimes to use them with specific transparent applications, the level of privacy that you get is pretty good. It's certainly much better than like using Ethereum today. It's not perfect. It's not a fully private world, but it's like pretty good. And you continue to use all of the applications that you're currently using, the assets that you're currently using. You don't have to pay this like very high transition.
Very insightful. And the mechanism you described earlier, how it reminded me of the mechanism we saw in Tornado Cash as well. And by that I mean, with increased liquidity and increased activity, you enhance privacy as well. So that applies to Namada too, as I understood. And by unifying the privacy set and having an umbrella for different assets, different chains, it's actually not the only USP of Namada, right? Because as I read a lot of your articles, it comes with a whole basket of USPs, including privacy seeding for new accounts, which is very interesting in my opinion, or even retrofitted privacy, which you mentioned earlier, or privacy as a public good, which is kind of Namada's incentive structure to bootstrap that liquidity and activity. It would be nice if you could give us some insights on these features, their implications, and why they matter.
Right. So one thing that is, unfortunately, like using public blockchains, when you start to use a public blockchain, all of your history gets tracked. It's visible to the world. So public blockchains they're a surveillance nightmare. They're much worse than the traditional financial system.
Agree.
The traditional financial system, I mean, maybe your information is visible to like, your bank and the government and some auditors, but at least it's not visible to the entire world. That's a, those people don't always do a good job of keeping it safe, but at least they where the blockchain doesn't even try. So when you use Ethereum, your information is just visible to everyone. It's visible to America, North Korea, Switzerland, and it's visible to my uncle, everyone, right?
Everybody.
So you're in some sense, your threat model of who could use this information to kind of take advantage of me or even just sell me ads is insane because you have to think about everyone, right? So yeah, I think transparent public blockchains are just not a good idea. It's nice that we had this experimental phase and learned that, but they're not going to work. And one way to at least bridge between these worlds is people still want to do things on public blockchains, right? There are all of these applications, stuff like this. Sometimes you want to use an application on Ethereum, and you need to give you need some ETH to do that, right? You need to pay gas. And at the moment, if you say that you have some ETH in your existing account on Ethereum, if you use that ETH and send it to this new account, that someone else can link these two accounts together. So they can see that it's maybe they don't know your name, maybe they get your name from some other firm or something, but they can see that it's linked, right? And sometimes you might not want that. Sometimes you might want to do some kind of swap, or you might want to vote in a DAO or something like this, and you just don't want everyone in the world to know that it's the same person. Very recently. For example, an example that I could use is that at the moment, for example, Heliax pays people, and we would like to pay people without, we can't actually have our financial records be public, as a company that's not necessarily compliant, and it doesn't seem like a good idea. So at the moment, we have to kind of use centralized exchanges basically to pay, because it's actually the most private way. If we if we want to pay someone in USDC, if someone wants to receive USDC, then at least there are a lot of people using Kraken. So at least some observer can see that, there was an Ethereum USDC transaction sent, but I don't know who specifically it was. They were just one of the users. So the best way you can get privacy on a transparent blockchain is by using a centralized exchange, which is pretty terrible, right?
Yeah, it's terrible.
But it's true. One of our theses with one of our USPs with Namada is just that that use case is actually a pretty big one. That a bunch of people just want to send payments. They might be moving the assets from somewhere else. And they don't want, maybe they want to send the payments actually to an address on Ethereum. A lot of people have Ethereum addresses, but they don't want some random third party who could be anyone in the world, because everyone in the world can read the Ethereum blockchain data. They don't want some third party to see, who they are necessarily sending the payment. So Namada can be used to kind of, you can, if you have some assets on Namada, someone can give you an Ethereum address, and you can pay them in one step. Unshielding those assets from Namada, sending it over the bridge, sending it to their Ethereum address. They don't need to care that Namada is involved, right? They don't need to think about what it is that you're doing. You don't need to link your previous Ethereum transaction data to this one transaction that you're making now. So this is definitely a case that we think is potentially appealing.
Okay, cool. So there's a lot of things that we get with Namada and its tech stack. I think we have some. It's time to nerd out a little bit now, and I would like to visit some of the core technical pillars of Namada, and there are a lot, as I understood. For example, it would be cool to cover the multi-asset shielded pool that you mentioned before, how it technically works, and also your convert circuit. And as I understood, you are also kind of maybe write the modular narrative as well. I'm referring to the modular privacy, and there you also have two kind of pillars: the unified shielded sets and the shielded actions. I'd be keen to understand how do they work, and how do they work together in the Namada protocol.
Right. Okay. So the multi-asset shielded pool is the kind of core cryptographic circuit of Namada. We usually just call it the MASP. The MASP is based on the Sapling protocol, Sapling circuit, originally developed by the electric coin company, Zcash. And we've extended Sapling with basically two things. support for multiple assets, which we do by changing sampling as basically the key concept is a note, like a note you can understand as representing or carrying the data of a UTXO. If you're familiar with Bitcoin, each note has an owner, it has an amount. In Zcash, it doesn't actually need to have an asset, but in Namada, it has assets. It has some other like cryptographic data. And basically your wallet just is like a bunch of notes. And if you have like a note of 1, NAM and a note of 2 NAM, then like your total balance is 3 NAM, something like this. So all of your, basically you can think of your balance as being split into individual coins. And the reason that ZK sort of privacy preserving systems like Zcash and Namada use this model is that it's very conducive to making zero knowledge proofs. Because when you have all of these notes and you want to send a payment to somebody else, you can gather all of the notes that you need basically together. So if I want to send you 5 NAM, maybe I have one note of 2, one note of 3, and I combine them together. I mint a new note of 5 NAM and I assign it to you, and I can make a zero knowledge proof, plus with this little homomorphic balance check that shows that this whole transaction is valid and that I didn't create any money out of thin air, but without revealing, any more data than that, basically. So it's very conducive to this level of privacy that we want. So the key change first key change that NMASP makes from sampling is the addition of an asset type. We do some stuff like derive the asset type and make sure all the rapid security properties work out. But that means that each note now has an asset type. So one NAM and a note to 2 USDC, and these notes are not fungible. So you cannot convert NAM into USDC or vice versa. If you could, that's on purpose, right? We don't want it to be fungible, because otherwise you could convert from any asset to any other asset. That would be very bad. So we kind of changed the circuit to make the balance check respect that non-fungibility different. Then the second addition is the convert circuit. So the convert circuit we implemented specifically for Namada's shielded rewards mechanism. It's a little bit more general than shielded rewards. It can also be used for other things, but I'll explain how it works in the context of shielded. So in the context of shielded rewards, Namada, the blockchain, mints some NAM, mints the staking kind of native token, and assigns that NAM as a reward, which can be claimed by people who hold their assets private. Now, what we want to allow them to do is to also claim this reward privately, because if they claim this reward in public, then they lose a bunch of privacy, because then they reveal like, you claimed, 0.12 units of reward. Well, now I kind of know what it is that you're holding privately. That seems bad. So the convert circuit allows users to basically prove that they have held some assets for a certain period of time, and that in proportion, like basically the integral of that period of time, multiplied by the reward rate, they can claim some. So the convert circuit is controlled by a special validity predicate on Namada. That validity predicate, which kind of like an account, enforces that when you are converting, when you're making a multi-asset shielded pool transaction, you can take some old notes, like let's say you have 2 USDC at block 10, and you're now converting it to 2 USDC at block 20. When you do that conversion, you can also mint a little bit of NAM. So then you can get 2 USDC at block 20, and you can get like 0.1 NAM, depending on the reward rate. And that's all shielded. So in order to do this, you didn't actually have to leave the shielded pool. Now later, you might decide that you want to unshield the NAM and stake it or something else. But when you do that, it's just like a regular unshielded. No one knows whether this NAM came from rewards or not. It's the same as any other NAM. So we kind of can provide these rewards without loss. That's the basic idea of the convert circuit.
Okay, I wasn't aware of the fact with the non-fungible assets. Very interesting. I wonder, like the convert circuit comes with some trade-offs, right? As it kind of limits you in programmability. So do I understand right that there won't be any DeFi stuff or dApps living on Namada? So is it just for like swapping and then going out again and then coming in again?
Right. So yes, Namada does not support general purpose programmability. It doesn't support smart contracts. It doesn't support private smart contracts. It only supports like basically shielded transfers and shielded rewards and the public goods funding system. And the reason for this is that, so making something like private DeFi work, actually the hard part is not the cryptography. You would think that the hard part is the cryptography, but the hard part is not the cryptography. The hard part is the multi-party interaction. because in something like Uniswap or Compound or these like popular Ethereum DeFi protocols, the smart contract is mediating counterparty discovery and interaction between a bunch of different users. And it's very, comparatively easy for the smart contract to mediate that because the smart contract has all the data. But if the smart contract doesn't have all the data, if you want to make more data private, then it's much harder to balance between like needing some, mediating protocol for counterparty discovery and wanting to provide privacy. So, for example, something like Penumbra is also not a general purpose programmable system. It's like very specifically to sort of swapping DEX. And that alone, it doesn't really like Penumbra preserves some privacy, but it still decrypts the batches. So you send your transactions to Penumbra, then there's like a batch assembled, then the batch is threshold decrypted, then the amounts of each trade are, that the batch total is still public to the validators and to everyone because they need it to compute. So I think that's a great architecture, nothing wrong with it. But we kind of want to split the problem into like private payments, which are very easy to do in a clearly private way, and an incentive compatible model for shielded rewards, and then allow for the DeFi stuff, just a lot of which is difficult to make private, to continue to coexist in this sort of public world until we figured out this like multi-party interaction thing correct. Okay. Then maybe try and make them private. So maybe that's where Anoma comes in. Like maybe we'll get to that next podcast. I don't want to divert too far, but I want to talk about now shielded actions. So how do we actually do this, right? The basic idea at Namada to balance these things is that you will hold your assets privately in the MASP. And when you want to do DeFi interactions or really like complex multi-party interactions, you will unshield some of them and do those interactions somewhere else. So that somewhere else could even be Penumbra, right? It could even be like one of these like specific, more privacy-preserving DeFi apps. I think that would be good. But many DeFi apps and many apps that people want to use just cannot be made privacy-preserving like that easily, or cannot be made privacy-preserving in a way that would like meaningfully provide more privacy that easily. So for these kinds of apps, we think that shielded actions would be appealing. And shielded actions is a sort of both protocol level and like interface level structure to make this process really automatic. So the idea being that when you go to, the Namada interface or an interface that supports Namada, if you want to swap assets, you can just like, it's like you're using Uniswap, you could swap assets. Now under this, there's one click. Now under the hood, the swap doesn't happen on Namada. The swap happens somewhere else. So first your assets are, when you click like swap for a shielded action, your assets are first unshielded on Namada, then they're sent in an IBC packet, say to Osmosis or to Penumbra. Then the swap happens on Osmosis or Penumbra. You get your new assets, then the asset comes back to Namada, then it's shielded again. That's like 3 steps. But all of those steps after the initial step can basically be automated by the interface and by some basically extra metadata and IBC packets that are going across these blockchains. So that you as a user, think about things much the same way as you think about using Uniswap or using Osmosis. Maybe there's a little extra latency, maybe not, depending, but you don't have to, if you have to do all these steps yourselves, it's very onerous. But if you could just think about, my assets are like shielded by default, I keep them on Namada or other protocols, what sort of thing. But when I want to do something with them, my interface kind of automates the process of unshielding of doing that thing and bringing any assets that I have at the end back for me. We think this could be pretty appealing.
Yeah, fair. Very helpful to understand that aspect, to be honest. And frankly, I don't want to talk the capabilities of Namada down, because actually you get a lot of very powerful activities enabled by Namada, as you outlined, like the shielded staking, shielded swaps, also shielded data publication, which becomes in the data availability age more and more important, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just the other thing I would add is that like, I do not see privacy protocols as in competition with each other. I think this is like a very weird way to view the world. Like most blockchains are public. Most users don't know how to use private systems. Most users may not even know like what private systems are and what they really mean in the context of what people care about. Namada is competing with sending transfers on Ethereum, and it's competing with like Visa. It's not competing with like when 95% of the blockchain ecosystem is private by default or something like this, then we could start talking about competition between privacy protocols. But until we get to that point, it's like we just need to make a privacy protocol that is usable enough and that like balances privacy and economics and user experience, like synthesizes them and balances them correctly such that it can actually become like palatable for a mainstream audience.
Yeah.
To me, that's the central challenge. And I think it's good that like we need more privacy protocols, frankly. I think there aren't enough of them. So I'm worried much more about the like, can we make this, arcane feature privacy, which is hard to explain to people, which makes all the protocols harder to build, which like imposes user experience costs, right? It's like hard, right? Can we make this palatable to users?
True.
As many ways that we can try to do that and like focus on specific verticals and collaborate. I think that's all necessary. So.
I agree. In that regard or in that context, maybe competitive landscape is just the wrong perspective to look at. And it's also very exciting for me to understand that the multi-party interactions is still a field of research. And as I understood, it's at some point maybe possible, because obviously I think it's a holy grail to have everything private, right? So it would be very nice to have that at some point in the future. I would like to shift topics a little bit and address the very elephant in the room now, which is privacy itself and financial privacy. I know Namada and Heliax perceives privacy as a fundamental right, and as we all know, like Tornado Cash was a huge in the media overall in the last couple of months. It was a great first shot. I used it myself for bringing privacy on chain, in my opinion, but it also, as we know, attracted some degree of illicit activity, right? And was subsequently and unfortunately sanctioned by the Treasury Department. And nowadays, or as of now, like all co-founders were faced charges, like just recently from the Department of Justice, which is insane. And now the question to you is, how does that make you feel building the next generation of privacy protocol? And moreover, how does all of that context like fit into your philosophical understanding of technology-enabled privacy?
Right. So, I mean, it definitely makes me nervous sometimes. The American government is like a scary thing.
Of course.
But I also think that I think the word privacy is like very misleading. So privacy implies an act of hiding something, right? Like, I might think about privacy like, some light is shining on me and I'm going to put a piece of paper in front to stop the light from shining. So that is something, that kind of privacy does exist in the like physical world. Like if someone is shining a light on you, you could put up a piece of paper and in some sense you get privacy. But this metaphor does not translate to digital networks. It's not, so digital network by default, like when you're sending a payment or whatever, the interaction just starts on your device. And it never, when you think a system like Zcash or Namada, it's not that we do something actively to make your data private. It's just that we don't send it to the public, right? Privacy is the default state, in fact, in digital systems. You don't need to commit some weird act to make your information private. You just need to find a way to demonstrate to your counterparty that you have like paid them, and to demonstrate to the validators of this blockchain that you've done a payment without also revealing all this information that you like didn't really intend to reveal and don't need to reveal strictly. So there's I think a bunch of misconception of what privacy actually is. In particular, as it relates to regulation, privacy is not, I can't comment on specifically what the U.S. government thinks or will do just because I'm not the U.S. government. The U.S. government is not even a unified thing. It's like many things, and it seems like they don't even agree with each other. So, I feel like they should go figure out like what it is that they want, and then maybe we could talk. But until they do that, I guess I would just say that, plausibly, regulations will require something like disclosure of specific information to specific parties. It's not clear to me, like, what else they could require. Like, they want some information to be disclosed to somebody. Maybe the government wants some information to be disclosed to that. That's something that a regulation might require. That is compatible with all privacy protocols. Not only is it compatible with all privacy protocols that currently exist, it's compatible with all privacy protocols that could possibly exist. Because privacy protocols don't prevent you from disclosing information. You can always disclose the information. You own the information if you're the user. So in fact, privacy protocols provide you more options to disclose information because they provide you the ability to like give a proof of some specific thing without maybe disclosing other information that you didn't need to disclose. So in theory, I think regulators should be very happy about this because now there's this tool with which, if they wanted to, they could articulate very precisely what it is that they want to be disclosed. And users could provide exactly that, in fact, because they've articulated it so precisely. And, I think that there's a separate question for citizens in a democracy of like, what is the right thing for the law to require as to what information should be disclosed? And, that is a question that I think like different societies really should decide for themselves. Like ultimately it's up to the citizens. And maybe I have some opinions on that as a citizen, I definitely do. But as a protocol designer, like I don't, like it has nothing to do with me. If the government wants certain information to be disclosed, then like they can say that people have to disclose that information and people can disclose that information to them or not if they want to. Like maybe if they don't, they will face consequences. Like that's not, just has nothing to do with me. Like the protocol can only support making proofs without disclosing information that you don't want to disclose, but that's completely compatible with like all possible laws. So I think there's this implicit assumption that privacy tech and like regulations that require disclosure of stuff are in conflict, and this assumption is just wrong. Like this understanding I have of it, at least, is that like I think it's based on a misconception of what privacy is in the digital context. And that, maybe the idea that like privacy is a sort of active hiding. And that if you're doing this active hiding, then you can't show us this information that we want. Maybe some regulators think that. That's not true. We spend time like talking to people. I think it's very important to just be very honest and direct about like what the technology does and what it doesn't do. And how if you have some specific disclosure requirements, how it could be compatible with those. But I think in order to do that, it also requires that the regulators clearly articulate what they want. So I hope that we'll see more engagement from that angle as well.
Yeah, definitely agree. And honestly, a great response. It's mind blowing how our default perspective, is like consolidated right now, or like it's like the whole picture changes if we change our default perspective on privacy, right? And unfortunately, until now, you mentioned it, like privacy implies some things that are not considered good, kind of, and therefore, as of now, privacy and regulatory compliance are perceived as incompatible, right? And just recently, I went through Vitalik's new paper on privacy pools. It's called Blockchain Privacy and Regulatory Compliance Towards a Practical Equilibrium. I bet you're familiar with it, but they introduced now in that paper privacy pools, which is a privacy enhancing protocol, and that protocol aims to separate the good from the bad, basically aiming to achieve some degree of privacy while being compliant. And I wonder how do these privacy pools compare to where Namada is going, and where does Namada hold strengths and weaknesses in that very comparison? And also, is it technically possible to differentiate between funds used in criminal activities and innocent funds on Namada, or do you plan to do that, or what's your take on that?
Right. Okay. So privacy pools. The privacy pools paper is kind of two things. One is sort of this description of a technical protocol for making proofs about funds held in, they mostly are using the Tornado Cash example, but funds held in some kind of privacy set. In particular, it's about making proofs that either those funds did not come from certain deposits, maybe certain deposits that like someone wants proof that they didn't come from, or that they did come from a big set of some other deposits. It's like the ban list versus allow list approach. And that approach to making proofs is fully compatible with Namada. Now, it's also fully compatible with Tornado Cash. So, to me, this piece of paper reads a little bit more like a piece of like diplomacy, especially given the authors. Then it's like, it looks like a technical paper, but I think it's kind of really diplomacy. The other thing but I think the approach is like, can be quite reasonable. I'm not convinced that, it's not necessarily something for which you need a change to an existing protocol. It seems like you might just need to make the right proofs. Now, I'm not sure that the paper also asserts that this would solve the compliance problem. I think the introduction says like the problem with Tornado Cash is blah, blah, blah. This assertion to me is a little bit odd because it's not clear by like OFAC's actual actions that it would. So OFAC sanctioned the Tornado Cash protocol. They didn't say. They could have said that you must make this specific kind of proof. In fact, Tornado Cash like already had a compliance tool that did something similar to this. And if OFAC had in fact said that, then I would be, compliance, who are you complying with? There's not one thing that is compliance. There are just these many different actors. But, insofar as we are talking about OFAC, which is what everyone's currently scared of, then, OFAC has not actually said what it would mean to be compliant. Like, so I hesitate to assume, like maybe they think something else is compliant. Maybe they're confused. Like, that's totally reasonable. Like, this tech is really complicated. I don't think we should be, I think the reaction that, and we should always have to people who are like unsure or scared or confused to like talk to them and try and establish mutual understanding. But it's not clear to me that like, if you were going to argue that something is compliant, like you would better be the regulator who's saying that it's compliant or not. It's kind of presumptive, not to critique the paper, but I just think it's not clear to me that statement is justified. If OFAC says like, we want a proof of X, where X is very clearly articulated, then I think it's like quite straightforward to build protocols. And it might look like parts of the privacy rules approach. It might not. The current banking system doesn't actually require this level of proof. Usually it just requires one-hop proofs. And one-hop proofs definitely don't definitely don't require changes with existing protocols. Like Zcash can do this just fine. And Zcash has never run into regulatory troubles, as far as I know. Yeah,
good point.
It's supported by Gemini and like all these like New York BitLicense regulated exchanges.
Yeah.
So I think the privacy rules approach is interesting, and I think it's a good thing to consider in the like litany of options for sort of seeing how to make the proofs that certain parties might want to make. But I would definitely not say that like it's the solution or that it's like the solution to compliance. I think first we need to understand what it is that compliance means.
What does it even mean? Yeah.
If we're having this conversation because like OFAC is terrifying. Like OFAC has secret courts. They have like 3 people who maintain a list who can just put you in jail, right? That's not very democratic. I'm maybe going to ignore the political. I don't want to debate the politics too much, but just like, why are we having this conversation? We're having this conversation because we're scared of OFAC. The only way that we are going to not be scared of OFAC is that either OFAC clearly articulates what compliance means, or we like change our democracy and, restrict this entity's ability to make arbitrary decisions. The way that, for example, the Coin Center interprets sanction of Tornado Cash is that it's unconstitutional. So whether or not Tornado Cash was in fact sanctioned and is in fact illegal actually depends on how you understand law. It's not like OFAC doesn't control what law is, right? What is the law? Maybe it's the result of some judicial process. Maybe it's like ultimately the result of what, the citizenry decides and along enough feedback system in a democracy. I am not a lawyer. I kind of read some of the analysis and like, I don't know. I agree with Coin Center. Like, I don't think Tornado Cash is illegal. It might be risky to use it. Like in practice, it might be risky. I'm not advising people to use it, but I'm saying that like, I don't think we should let OFAC declare what is or is not illegal. They don't actually get to
I get to say
they get to threaten people, but they don't get to like declare what law is. So,
it's also kind of crazy to see this jurisdictional overreach, right?
Right.
I mean, all of these decentralized application and networks, they have no jurisdiction, but still, like the influence of the OFAC is like is global. I mean, we saw it with the
American Empire. It's real.
I very closely followed the data on the sanctioning or like censoring relayers on Ethereum. I'm pretty happy that it's now on a more healthy level again, but it was like mind-boggling to me that the whole network went like compliant, whatever that means, So I would like to understand, like we're inching closer to the end of the interview. It was great so far. I would like to understand get some insights on your decision process on why you chose the Cosmos ecosystem. I mean, you are in very good company. For example, recently, or Celestia is close to mainnet launch as well. Like very strong players are joining the Cosmos space, and I wonder, like, why did you choose Cosmos? Of course, your background explains a lot already. Tendermint and IBC, and maybe I would also know. I understand that it's easily to connect to other IBC chains or interchains. But you also build a custom bridge to Ethereum, and I wonder how that bridge design you chose, because they are always prone to some trust assumptions and some kind of single point of failures, right? Maybe you could give us some insights on that one.
Right. So I think there are a few questions there. One kind of on choosing Cosmos. Namada uses Tendermint, or Comet as it's now called, which is part of the Cosmos. I mean, I would say Namada really wants to be part of both the Cosmos and Ethereum ecosystems, which I think are becoming more, they're kind of intermingled anyways, but I think they'll continue to merge in some ways. That said, we're sort of focusing on Cosmos first. I think that's, for a few reasons. One, the kind of Cosmos philosophy of, political polycentrism, or sort of local first community blockchains, kind of all of these different sort of autonomous zones, is one that I think is very compatible with and kind of recognizes the need for privacy to preserve this kind of freedom and polycentrism. So I think that there's a lot of desire for privacy in Cosmos. There have been like privacy in Cosmos events for several years now, despite there not actually being any privacy projects in Cosmos. So I think there's like there's this kind of demonstrated demand from that ecosystem that we see. Another reason is that IBC is very conducive to making Namada's privacy offering super user-friendly. It's cheap, it's fast. You could send your assets to the MASP and start transferring them or doing whatever in like 5 seconds or something like this. And that's not Ethereum, just will never be that fast. With Tornado Cash or with rollups or with Namada or whatever, Cosmos has optimized for quick interoperability. And I think quick interoperability makes a big difference in user experience. As for why we built a custom Ethereum bridge, well, you mentioned trust assumptions. We built a custom Ethereum bridge to reduce the number of additional trust assumptions. So when you use, bridges range, the term unfortunately means nothing specific. Bridges range from being like a bridge with one signer to a bridge with a multi-sig of signers, like the IBC model, which tries to only rely on the consensus set. There are other Ethereum bridges in Cosmos. I think that they're actually pretty good on the whole, but we wanted users to have an option to just send their assets from Ethereum without needing to accept, any additional intermediary bridge trust. The Namada Ethereum bridge is operated by the Namada validators, so it's vertically integrated in a certain sense. So if you're using Namada, you're already accepting the Namada validators as like trust assumption. So using the Ethereum bridge doesn't increase the trust assumption.
And how is it on the other end, on the Ethereum end?
Right. On the Ethereum end, it's kind of like we implemented like a very restricted version of IBC between Namada and Ethereum. So on the Ethereum end, there's a smart contract which validates all of the Namada validators' signatures. So when you send from Ethereum to Namada, the Namada validators like run an Ethereum node, they read the Ethereum event, they vote on it, they confirm it, and when you send it back, the Namada validators like vote to basically sign a message, multi-sign a message that tells Ethereum that, oh, like someone sent a transaction back to Ethereum.
Ah, cool. Yeah. I think I recently read there's some project that also aims to bring IBC to Ethereum, but I forgot which one, to be honest. Also, like, very interesting to see, like, with bridges. Obviously, IBC is like awesome, and I wish it would become like kind of the ecosystem or industry standard. It's still possible. I wouldn't rule that out, to be honest. But yeah, we see great progress on the bridge tech as well. I think also some zero knowledge stuff sneaks into some approaches and solutions. So obviously, as also a super interesting space, since it's the area where crypto lost the most money outside from Terra Luna and FTX.
Right. Yeah. I mean, bridges are not created equal. You know, like IBC so far has a pretty good track record.
Yeah.
A bunch of bridges don't. You know, I'm not gonna critique too much, but I'll just say that like there are definitely some, you know, people call things bridges that are so drastically different that I don't know if they deserve to be grouped up in the same category.
Yeah, fair. So talking about all of these advancements, I wonder how do you see? I mean, you mentioned already that kind of all of the changes will at some point blend together and we will find a chain standard, hopefully. How do you envision the crypto landscape to shape in the upcoming years, especially since this cryptographic breakthrough technology, which is ZK, is like maturing right now? A lot of projects are launching. Like, I feel we're having a lot of momentum, and I wonder, like, how do you see that in that regard? And also, will we see, maybe it's Namada, like privacy solutions see broad adoption in the next couple months and years?
Right. I mean, this is a broad question of prediction, which I definitely can't answer exactly. You know, I do think that we're in this, you know, the past like big crypto bubble or somewhere or whatever you want to call it was the sort of like DeFi Ponzi casino, and there was some interesting stuff, but a lot of it was Ponzi casino, and a lot of it was like FTX and sort of, you know, disguised Ponzi casino. And I think that basically like the era when Ponzi casino waves happened several times, arguably. And they brought, you know, they funded a lot of good tech. So I'm not saying it's necessarily all bad, but I do think that, you know, often it gave the industry the illusion that we had like actually solved a problem for people. And I think that was an illusion. I think that crypto has not succeeded in like, if you understand what it is that crypto set out to build is like sort of like autonomous or you know, non-intermediated digital cash or digital sort of economic infrastructure that everyday people can use to kind of not need to trust some central third party, that we've not succeeded in building that yet, to in the sense that people actually use it to actually do that. Maybe there's some niches where there's experimentation going on, but like as a broad-based product, we have not succeeded. And I think that in order to, you know, the like next wave, or so to speak, really is going to require that we find a use case for people doing real economic things who like don't care about the protocols, that we solve well enough to make it just viable as like consumer tech. You know, I think that maybe private payments is such a use case. The level of rent extraction that like Visa and MasterCard and Western Union and all of this stuff do.
Insane.
It's kind of insane.
It's crazy.
It's like trillions of dollars. It's like, there's the market. Why? Like, this is the easiest market in the world, you know? Like, why are we building all this complicated stuff? You can't even do the simple thing. So, you know, I think that's one market to go after. And there are definitely others, and there's sort of more experimental stuff. But I mean, there is a lot of stuff launching. I think a lot of it's still like the funding is and the design maybe is like quite infrastructure biased. Of course, it's easy to say that as someone building more infrastructure, but you know, I think infrastructure needs funding, and like historically maybe it was underfunded, so it's good that there's a lot of it, but it hasn't yet. Like, there's a lot of we have a lot of roll-ups, but like, what are they for? Like, who's using this? What is the actual product that this whole ecosystem is serving? So I think that in order to really move on from this stage of sort of like infrastructure funding and some uncertainty. We need to, solve the problem that regular people have in a way that the system is sustainable and doesn't rely on like US dollar interest rates or capital injections or Ponzi casino mechanisms or whatever. And until we do that, I don't think anything will change in the sort of broader socioeconomic structure. But once we do that, probably some things can start aligning towards that.
Yeah. So there's still hope.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, like what else is there? Clearly the world, at least I want to see sort of autonomy and interoperability freedom preserving protocols in the world. So
also, I very much agree with all of your takes. And also, if you look at the potential threats that are coming up, like already, like whatever deep fakes, where like you can cover so many things, and crypto and decentralized networks are solution to a lot of them. And also, I think we are in for a rehaul of our kind of more or less obsolete financial system. You just said like
right.
What we lose to intermediaries only in financial system, it's absolutely crazy numbers. It's crazy. Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned, I think in the beginning of the interview, you're close to mainnet. Maybe what's your go-to-market strategy, and will you make some noise soon? And then also, do you have some advice for our audience, for users and developers alike who are keen to explore Namada? What resources are available to help them get started?
Right. So my advice to people interested in Namada is to join the testnet. The Namada testnet is running. You can already do shielded transfers, most of the stuff. We're sort of finishing up a few nits on the edges, but the docs are pretty good. There's like a community, there's a validator support channel. You can start building block explorers and other things. Definitely get started with that. And we'd love to chat and help you out where we can. But it's a permissionless protocol, so you could just start doing it. You don't need to ask us. Yeah, in terms of go-to-market strategy, I think we're focused on really trying to provide privacy as a service to the Cosmos ecosystem first, seeing if we can nail that and seeing if we can, build interfaces that what I want to do personally, I use Signal and I just want to use like Signal with privacy with Namada. I don't know. I mean, Signal, I think, is skeptical of crypto for good reason and currency, that is. And, it may take some time to get there, but if we can even get to the point where like people can do regular payments and not really, it's just like Venmo, but it's Namada, and Venmo is like weird surveillance app. But yeah, but it should be easy and have kind of, you don't need to use SNAM. You don't need to think about like weird crypto economics. You can use USDC or your E. There's this new like Monerium project that has a very nice sort of seamless EBON your E connection model that can integrate with Namada. We can integrate USDC from Noble on Namada. So I mean, a lot of it is just like, private payments, like, but make it actually work. That's part of the strategy. And then trying to figure out like, Namada has this public goods funding system. What are all the levels of tooling required to make the privacy preserving stack viable, to mainstream users, and as like actually preserve privacy that they care about. Like if you introduce like Infura, then you lose a bunch of privacy. So the existing crypto ecosystem has a lot of components that rely on their privacy. And if we want to provide privacy to people, we have to kind of ditch them and like redesign them. There's a fair amount of that to figure out. I think we are aiming for like slow and steady, not too slow, but definitely steady in terms of, we don't immediately want like $1 million of ETH assets sent over the bridge or something. Like, let's proceed gradually and make sure that it actually works in the lower when it's slow power. So,
sounds good. I'm very excited for mainnet, to be honest, and I'm also keen to explore a little bit more. I think I want to end this great discourse on a very positive note, Christopher. I deeply respect what your team and you are fighting for, which is kind of achieving on-chain privacy. and thereby kind of protecting us from a potential dystopian surveillance paradigm, right? With that, I guess I look forward to the deep dive into Namada. I thank you tons for your precious time, and obviously we from Bitcoin Suisse wish you and the team a very smooth ride into mainnet and a successful launch.
Thank you. Yeah, the only last word I would offer is, ultimately, whether we end up in a world of like privacy by default is not up to the product. Like, we're here to help. We're here to provide mathematical options. We're here to provide like software that people can run. That's how we want to contribute. But ultimately, it's up to like whether people in society choose that they want to live in such a world. It's up to you. It's up to me, citizens. It's up to like the broad public. The protocols will like eventually work themselves out. I think there's enough funding and enough movement in there. Not that we don't have to do things, we do, but I am less worried about protocols than culture. I think understanding how the culture sort of needs to change and kind of dealing with the sort of anti-privacy propaganda that's like, there are billboards in Williamsburg and Brooklyn that are like, I don't know, it's something about, Apple lets child pornography exist on iCloud or something, because they didn't implement this client-side scanning proposal. It's like, this is not necessarily some benign world where we just have to build privacy-preserving protocols. And this is like a pretty adversarial world. And not that I'm not suggesting we go fight people, but like people need to choose that they want to live in such a world. They need to take actions in like voting and in talking to their friends, their sort of political communities and in their societies about what that actually needs. So
I very much agree on that take. And if I may add, like, we see that a lot in crypto. It really usually it boils down to the social layer, right? And I guess it also needs awareness, education, and so forth. But I'm pretty positive. I feel we will figure it out. And thanks a lot for all the insights.
Thank you.